Um, the zero product property, it says that if A times B equals 0, then either A has to equal 0 or B has to equal 0, or both.
It's not writing.
So if you solve a quadratic equation by doing the same process, like the A times B equals 0, we can factor this. So we're going to factor the trinomial, two sets of parentheses, and we just have this equals 0 over at the end. So what multiplies to x squared?
X times x.
X times x. What multiplies to 18?
6 and 3.
Right, with 18 and 1, 6 and 3, 9 and 2. And we're going to try 6 and 3. 6 and 3 we'll start with. So let's check. Can 6, like if you check the inside and outside, 6x, 3x, can that give us a negative 3? Can that give us negative 3x?
You did a negative 6 and a positive 3.
Yeah, we want to do minus 6 and a positive 3. Because now we have negative 6x, a positive 3x. That adds up to negative 3x, which is what we wanted. Okay? So now at this point, I'm going to want to erase this. If you draw this work down here, I'm going to erase it to make more room. If you have room at the bottom of your, underneath that, you could have kept it, but I just needed more room here for now. So now that we factor this, what this is saying is, it's really like saying A times B equals 0. X minus 6 times x plus 3 equals 0. So it's the same thing we had up here, right? Up here, it says A times B equals 0. Either A is 0 or B is 0, right? So using that same property, down here we have x minus 6 times x plus 3. So using the 0 property, that means either x minus 6 has to equal 0 or x plus 3 has to equal 0, right? One of them has to be 0. Because one of them is A and one of them is B. You're multiplying them together and you get 0. So one of them has to be 0. So if you solve the first equation, you'd add 6. You would get x equals 6. Or solve the second equation, you'd minus 3. So x equals negative 3. So your two answers would be either x equals 6 or x equals negative 3. Because when you take those numbers and plug them in now, 6 minus 6 is 0. If you take negative 3 and plug it in, negative 3 plus 3 is 0. So you're going to get 0 when you plug them in. Okay, and if you actually put them in your original equation up here, you would also get 0. It would work out. As long as you factor correctly and solve correctly, you'll get 0 when you plug it in. Let's try number 2. Okay, if you look above, notice how the equation equals 0. It's A times B equals 0. So what we want to do is make the equation equal 0. So you want to put a little note, make equal to 0. We had to do that first. How can we make this equal 0? What do we have to do?
Add 20 on both sides.
To get rid of minus 20, you would add 20 to both sides. So we would have 0. And over here we have m squared plus 12m plus 20. So now we have a trinomial on the left and 0 on the right. And now we got to factor. What multiplies to m squared? M times m. What multiplies to positive 20 that could give us 12? You could like 20 and 1, 4 times 5, 10 times 2.
10 times 2.
10 times 2. So we're going to do 10 and 2 because the inside is 10m, the outside is 2m. 10m and 2m is 12m, and 10 times 2 is 20. So we're going to do plus and plus. So we factor that, we get 10 and 2. Now, if we're going to solve it, remember, think what we set up here. The property says if two things are multiplied together and you get 0, one of them has to be 0. So down here, two things are multiplied together. One of them has to be 0 in order to get 0. So m plus 10 equals 0, or m plus 2 has to equal 0. Right? That's the only possible way we're going to get a 0. Is if m plus 10 is 0 or if m plus 2 is 0. So we would solve. The first one, you'd minus 10 to get m equals negative 10. The second one is minus 2. You would get m equals negative 2. So we're able to factor that and solve, because once it's equal to 0, you can factor it and set the two factors, these two things, equal to 0 to find your answer. Okay, and that's really what we're going to cover today. That's the gist of it. The reason we learn how to factor is because we can factor to solve things. Because if we didn't know how to factor, there's no other way we learned yet on how to solve that. You can't solve that equation without factoring right now. So that's the purpose of it. Okay, we do tie this in now to stuff we learned earlier this year. A little review from 5.1. Intercept form. So intercept form is y equals a times x minus p times x minus q. In this case, the p and the q were called the intercepts. That was from our last quiz we had. Okay, the numbers you get for p and q are also called the zeros of the function. Okay, they're called the zeros because when you set equal to 0, those are the answers you get. Kind of like above, we set them equal to 0. That was the solution. These are called the zeros because they're actually where y equals 0. The intercepts are where y equals 0 as well. Okay, so what we're going to do here is write the equation in intercept form and determine the zeros of the function. So basically, factor and find p and q is what we're going to do. Factor and find p and q. So you look at the equation. What's the first thing we check for when we factor?
GCF.
GCF. Is there a GCF?
Yes.
Yes. 2. Take out a 2, and the leftovers are in parentheses. So x squared minus 5x plus 6. So we took out the GCF. This is still not in intercept form. To get to intercept form, we have to factor. And we're not done factoring yet. So we have a trinomial in the parentheses. We can factor this by doing 2 sets of parentheses and doing our smiley face method. So what multiplies to x squared?
X and X.
X times x. Now, what multiplies to 6? That can give us -5.
6 and 1.
So we could try 6 and 1. Let's try it out. So if you do 6 and 1, what you'd have to do is you need a -6 and a +1, right? The only way that would work is if you had -6x and +1x. That would give us -5. But what is -6 times +1?
+6. Oh, wait.
-6 times -1 is a -6, and right here we have a +6. So that's not going to work. Actually, in this one, when you factor it, you're going to do -3 and -2. Because -3x plus -2x is -5x. Right? When you check your inners and your outers, you're going to get -5. And -3 times -2 is 6. So this is the factored form. What does P equal? What is P and what is Q? Think up here. Look on the top right corner. What's P and what's Q?
P is -3 and Q is -2.
And actually, it's going to be the opposite. Remember, in parentheses, when we did the graphing, we said like parentheses means do the opposite. And here's why we always said pick the opposite. Because to find your zeros, you would do x minus 3 equals 0, and you would solve. When you solve this, you would add 3 to get x equals 3. So one of your zeros is 3. The other 0 you would do is x minus 2 equals 0, and you would solve. If you add 2, you get x equals 2. So the other 0 is 2. So the zeros are the same as your P and Q. So the zeros are the same as the intercepts. The intercepts are at 3 and 2. The zeros are 3 and 2. Okay, and that's just kind of connecting what we did in 5.1. All this chapter kind of connects together. So I'm gonna do one of the two here. So if we do number 2, we're gonna put this in intercept form. So what this means is you have to factor and find P and Q. So if you look at the right side, the 5x squared minus 30x, start with the GCF. The GCF is 5x. Okay, and the leftovers are x minus 6. Okay, so what we really have is, you can think of it as we have two sets of parentheses. We have 5x, and we have x minus 6. This is really, if you want to get down to it, it's 5x minus 0. If you want to do your P's and Q's. That's one way to think about it. Another way you could do is just do 5x equals 0, x minus 6 equals 0, and you would solve. If you solve the first equation, what is 0 divided by 5?
0.
So one of the zeros is 0. The other equation, you would add 6. What is 0 plus 6?
6.
6. So those are the two zeros you get. All right, so the formulas you're going to use, we rectangle and triangle formula. We probably won't do the trapezoid circle one at all. You won't see that. But the rectangle one is what we're going to do together right now. So it says find the dimensions of the polygon given the area, and then we have the length and the width. Okay, so the formula for the rectangle is area equals length times width. So we can solve this problem by using factoring. We plug in the area. The area is 112. The length is x plus 5. And the width is x minus 4. So in this problem, we actually are going to do some factoring by the time we're done with it. So the first step is let's FOIL. So if you FOIL the right side, x times x is x squared. X times negative 4 is negative 4x. 5 times x is 5x. And 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. So we get 112 equals x squared minus 4x plus 5x minus 20. Okay, now I'm going to do a lot of steps in one. I'm going to set this equal to 0, right, because we want to find the zeros. So minus 112. So we have 0 equals, we have an x squared. Now, negative 4x plus 5x is 1x. So it's x squared plus x. And then over here at the end, negative 20 minus 112 is negative 132. Okay, so the reason we FOILed and then set that equal to 0 is because now we can factor this and find our answers. We can factor this and solve for x, just like we did above. You make it equal to 0, and then you factor it and set them equal to 0. Okay, so if we were to factor this, there's no GCF. We're going to do smiley face. What multiplies to x squared?
X and X.
Times x. What multiplies to 132? To save time, these are kind of big numbers, it's 11 and 12. 11 times 12 is 132. How can you make 11x and 12x add up to a positive 1?
Twelve minus 11.
Yeah, we want a positive 12 and a negative 11. Exactly. So we get 0 equals x minus 11 times x plus 12. Okay. The last step would be set them equal to 0. So x minus 11 equals 0, or x plus 12 equals 0. And you solve these. So you solve the one on the left, you would add 11, and you would get x equals 11, or solve the one on the right, you'd minus 12, and you would get x equals negative 12. So these are the possible answers. However, if you want to find the length and the width, let's look what happens. The two answers are 11 or negative 12. If I take negative 12 and I come up here and I put negative 12 in for x, so negative 12 plus 5, what do you get? Negative 7. Can the length of this side be negative 7?
No.
No, a length can't be negative. So what that means is that answer down here, that x equals negative 12, is not going to work. Cross it out. That does not work because it gives us a negative side length. Side lengths can't be negative. So the answer we're going to use is 11. So you take 11, you go back up here, you do 11 plus 5 equals 16, and 11 minus 4 equals 7. So there's your length and your width. All right, so I'm going to go back and do these two problems that I haven't done yet. So this number 3 one where it says find the intercepts or find the zeros. So again, we're going to look to factor the trinomial. So we got to do 2 sets of parentheses because we're doing smiley face. So what multiplies to 3x squared? 3x times x. Okay, and then I'm going to list the numbers that multiply to 10. 10 times 1 or 5 times 2. Those are the numbers we're going to use in the parentheses. So if we start with 5 and 2, put 5 and 2 in there because 5 times 2 is 10, and check. 5x, 6x. Well, 5x and 6x give us 17. They will not. So I'm going to erase. I'm going to flip those around. Instead of doing 5 and 2, let's do 2 and 5. And then check. 2x will be the inside, and 15x. Does that give us 17? Yes, we need a positive 2 and a positive 15, so a plus and a plus. Okay, so I'm going to erase this to make some room. So we have y equals 3x plus 2, x plus 5. How do we find the zeros? We set them equal to 0. So 3x plus 2 equals 0, or x plus 5 equals 0. Okay, this is the part where you got to pay attention. The one on the right is pretty simple. You just minus 5, and you get x equals negative 5. Okay, the one on the left is where it gets a little trickier. You would minus 2 to get 3x equals negative 2. And then divide by 3. So you would get x equals 2/3. So our second 0 is going to be a fraction. It's negative 2 over 3. So when you find the zeros, you got to solve the equation in the parentheses, set that equal to 0. It's not always opposite. Sometimes it takes 2 steps. Okay, and then the very last one, the triangle. The formula for a triangle is area equals 1/2 times base times height. So in this one, the base is 3x minus 1, and the height is 2x. And the area is 80. So this would be 80 equals 1/2 times 3x plus 1 times 2x. Okay, you can multiply. 3x times 2x is 6x plus, 6x squared, plus 2x times 1 is 2x. Okay, and then the last thing we would do is distribute that 1/2. 1/2 times 6 is 3x squared. 1/2 times 2 is 1. So we get 80 equals 3x squared plus 1. And again, in these steps up here, we did some distribution. We distributed the 2x, and then I distributed that 1/2 to get rid of the 1/2. Next, let's make this equal 0. 0 equals 3x squared plus 1x minus 80. Then we got a factor. Okay, what multiplies to 3x squared? 3x times x. What multiplies to 80? This can be a little trickier. 80 is 80 times 1, 40 times 2, 20 times 4, 16 times 5, and 10 times 8. Okay. I would normally start with 10 times 8, but I don't think that's going to work out, because if you put 10 over here, 10 times 3 is 30. 30 is not close to 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pick 16 and 5. So we check the inside and check the outside. We get 16x and 15x. Can 16x and 15x give us a positive 1? You can get positive 1 if you have a negative 15, because 16 plus negative 15 is 1x. So what we want is we want a minus 5 and a plus 16. Okay, so when we factor that out, we get 0 equals 3x plus 16, x minus 5. So if we solve these, we'd set them equal to 0. So it'll be 3x plus 16 equals 0, and x minus 5 equals 0. If you solve the one on the right, you would add 5 to get x equals 5. If you solve the one on the left, it's minus 16. So 3x equals negative 16, and then divide by 3. X equals negative 5.3. Okay, and just like the last problem, if x is negative, it would give us a negative number in our triangle up here. So this one does not work. The x we use is 5. So the base is 3 times 5 plus 1, which would be 16. And the height is 2 times 5, which is 10.